Don't get in the car. The words left Eleanor Whitaker's mouth before fear could drag them back. Matteo DeLuca had one gloved hand on the open door of the black armored sedan, the other still brushing the knot of his silk tie, when Ellie stepped between him and the vehicle like a wall no one had given permission to exist. She was supposed to be invisible in her gray maid's uniform, a very large white woman with soft arms, heavy hips, and a quiet face the mansion staff had trained themselves to ignore. But now her fingers were on the black tie at the throat of the most dangerous man in Chicago, straightening it with trembling precision while her eyes stayed fixed on the driver's mirror. Behind the windshield, Victor Hale sat too still. His right shoulder was angled wrong. His hand was not on the wheel. It was low, hidden near the console, where no professional driver's hand should have been. "Your driver has a gun," Ellie whispered. "Don't get in the car." The marble foyer died around her. Two bodyguards reached for their jackets. One moved toward Ellie first, not the car. "Step away from Mr. DeLuca," he snapped, disgust sharp in his voice. "You don't touch him." Ellie felt the command hit the room before it hit her body. She knew what they saw. A housemaid who took up too much space, who polished silver and carried linen, who should have lowered her eyes and moved when men in black suits passed. Victor was trusted. Victor wore a pressed jacket. Victor had driven Matteo for 6 years. Ellie was the woman who scrubbed rainwater from the tiles after his tires crossed the driveway. But her fingers did not leave the tie. She had tied that knot herself 20 minutes earlier in the West dressing room because Matteo's usual valet had called in sick. She remembered the angle of it. She remembered the faint trace of gun oil that had not belonged on Victor's driving gloves when he took the keys. She remembered the sedan parked 3 feet closer to the steps than protocol allowed, close enough that a body could fall into the back seat before anyone understood why. Matteo did not move. That was the first strange mercy. He did not soften, did not thank her, did not protect her with some grand romantic gesture. He simply went still, and when Matteo DeLuca went still, every violent man around him became afraid of breathing too loudly. His dark eyes lowered to Ellie's hand on his tie, then rose to her face. She was breathing hard, but she was not crying. Her body stood firm between him and the open car door, not graceful, not delicate, but solid enough to stop a king for one impossible second. "Ellie," he said, using her name for the first time she had ever heard. The sound cut deeper than the bodyguard's insult. Victor's reflection flickered in the windshield. A tiny movement, a wrist turning, metal catching the chandelier light for half a heartbeat. The nearest guard finally looked toward the sedan, but by then Matteo was looking only at Ellie, as if the whole mansion had narrowed to the woman everyone overlooked and the secret she had just dared to speak. "Tell me," he said quietly, "exactly what you saw." Matteo's question hung between Ellie and the open sedan like a loaded wire. "Tell me exactly what you saw." The black tie was still pinched between her fingers, warm from his throat, forbidden in her hand. Behind her, one bodyguard breathed hard through his nose, insulted by the idea that a maid had stopped a convoy he was paid to protect. Victor Hale remained behind the windshield, too composed, too polished, his face unreadable beneath the mansion lights. Ellie knew that if she stammered, they would drag her away. If she exaggerated, they would call her hysterical. If she stayed silent, Matteo DeLuca would step into a coffin with leather seats. So she swallowed once and said, softly, "His right hand is below the dash. He never drives like that." No one answered. That was the problem with being Eleanor Whitaker in the DeLuca estate. People noticed the trays she carried, the bed she turned down, the rainwater she wiped from marble floors after men in black suits walked through without looking down. They noticed her body only when they wanted a reason to dismiss her, whispering that a woman built so soft and large must also be slow, clumsy, easy to overlook. But the mansion had taught Ellie a different kind of survival. Invisible women saw everything. She knew which guards drank coffee with shaking hands after midnight. She knew which lawyer wiped cocaine from his nose before lying to Matteo. She knew the exact sound of Victor Hale's shoes because he always paused twice at the garage threshold, left heel first, then right. Tonight, he had not paused at all. 20 minutes earlier, Ellie had been in the west dressing room with a black tie laid across her palms, trying not to breathe too loudly while Mateo stood before the mirror in a tailored charcoal suit. His usual valet was absent, and no one else wanted the responsibility of touching the boss before a meeting with Caleb Rourke's men. Ellie had stepped forward because wrinkled silk offended her more than fear did. She had tied the knot cleanly, centered it, and moved away before anyone could accuse her of lingering. Mateo had looked at her reflection for 1 second too long, not kindly, not warmly, but as if he had registered that her hands did not shake when every other servant's did. Then Victor entered for the keys. His gloves smelled wrong. Not motor oil, not leather. Gun oil, faint and metallic, hidden beneath expensive cologne. Ellie had smelled it once before when a guard dropped a pistol in the laundry chute after a rain-soaked patrol and ordered her not to ask questions. She had asked none. She had remembered everything. Now, in the foyer, the bodyguard beside her muttered, "She cleans rooms. She doesn't read threats." Ellie turned her head just enough to meet his eyes, then asked him to put both hands on the wheel. The silence changed. It did not become safe. It became interested. Mateo lifted 2 fingers, and every gun hand in the foyer froze exactly where it was. His gaze never left Ellie's face. "Who told you about the garage protocol?" he asked. "No one," Ellie said. "I clean up after it." For the first time, the insult in the bodyguard's mouth died before it could become sound. Mateo released the car door. The sedan's interior light glowed over Victor's motionless shoulder. Somewhere under the dashboard, something clicked. Mateo's voice dropped so low the chandelier seemed to stop trembling. "Take Miss Whitaker to the west security room. Bring the tie, and lock every door between here and the garage." The west security room door sealed behind Ellie with a sound that did not belong in any normal house. It was not a click. It was a judgment. 3 bodyguards took position between her and the exit, while another laid Mateo de Luca's black tie on the center of a polished steel table as if it were evidence for murder. Ellie stood under the cold camera lights, her gray maid's uniform damp at the collar, her soft, heavy body taking up space in a room designed for men who made other people disappear. Nobody offered her a chair. Nobody told her she was safe. On the wall, 12 surveillance screens showed the De Luca estate from every angle. Marble corridors, velvet ropes, the rain-gloss driveway, the garage doors locked down under red security lamps, and the black sedan still waiting like an animal pretending to sleep. Mateo entered last. The room changed before he spoke. Men straightened. Hands left weapons. One guard who had been glaring at Ellie suddenly looked at the floor. Mateo wore no tie now, only the open collar of his white shirt beneath a charcoal suit that made him look carved from money and violence. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Run the driveway feed. A guard touched the keyboard. The screen filled with Ellie stepping between Mateo and the sedan, her hands lifting to his throat, her face pale but fixed on the windshield. From this angle, she looked guilty. Too close to him. Too bold. A maid touching a king in front of his soldiers. The head of security glanced at her with open contempt. "Convenient angle," he said. "She blocks your line of sight, boss." Victor could say she caused the panic. Ellie felt the old heat rise in her chest, the familiar shame of being made too visible only when someone needed a target. In the laundry rooms, in the servant halls at the edge of banquets where women in silk looked through her like glass, she had learned that people believed uniforms before they believed women like her. A driver's jacket meant loyalty. A maid's apron meant silence. Mateo's gaze moved from the screen to Ellie. "Where should the sedan have been?" he asked. Not gentle, not kind. A test. Ellie looked at the feed once, then at the floor map glowing beside the monitors. "Past the 3rd marble seam," she said. "Nose toward the east column, not the steps. Victor always leaves space for your left side exit, because your right shoulder faces the house when you enter." Tonight he pulled closer so the door would hide his hand. No one laughed. The hum of the servers became loud enough to hear. Mateo lifted his eyes to the guard at the keyboard. Rewind 20 minutes. The screen shifted to the garage. Victor appeared near the driver's door, accepting the keys. Ellie appeared in the corner of the frame, carrying the tie box. invisible to everyone except the lens. Victor's gloves flashed pale under the garage lights. He paused at the dashboard, then looked toward the camera. The feed flickered for half a second. Camera glitch, the head of security said too quickly. Ellie saw Mateo hear that too. She saw the stillness settle into him like a blade sliding free. Then the phone on the steel table lit up with a blocked number. The guard checked the screen and went rigid. "It's Rourke's line." Mateo did not answer. He looked at Ellie, then at the black tie lying between them. "Miss Whitaker," he said quietly, "tell me why my camera went blind the moment my driver touched that dash." "Why?" the head of security repeated before Ellie could answer, his voice flat with contempt. "Because she needed a reason to put her hands on you." The West security room went so still that even the blocked coal pulsing on the steel table seemed to make a sound. Ellie stood beside Mateo's black tie, surrounded by screens, guns, and men who had already decided what kind of woman she was. A maid who forgot her place. A large, soft body in a gray uniform daring to occupy the center of a room built for killers. The guard lifted the tie with 2 fingers and let the silk dangle between them. "This is what she wanted, boss. A keepsake. A story. Maybe a payday from Rourke. Maybe just 5 seconds pretending she belonged near your throat." Heat crawled up Ellie's neck, but she did not lower her eyes. The insult was not new. Only the audience had changed. Laundry girls had whispered it. Caterers had smirked it. Rich women had said it with perfume and smiles when Ellie passed too close to their velvet chairs. A woman like her was allowed to clean luxury, not stand inside it. She was allowed to touch a powerful man's suit only while invisible. The moment she became visible, her hands turned suspicious. "I didn't take anything," Ellie said. Her voice was quiet enough that the room had to lean toward it. "And I didn't touch him for myself." The guard's mouth twisted. "Listen to that. She even sounds rehearsed." Another bodyguard gave a short, ugly laugh, then stopped when Mateo turned his head. Mateo had not defended her. Not yet. He stood at the edge of the table with his sleeves immaculate, his face unreadable, his silence colder than anger. But his eyes were moving now, from Ellie's face to the tie, from the tie to the frozen garage feed. He was not saving her. He was measuring everyone. The blocked number flashed again. "Rourke's line." The head of security reached for the phone. "Let me trace it." "No," Mateo said. "One word." The guard's hand stopped an inch from the screen. Ellie felt the old humiliation press against her ribs, heavy and familiar, but beneath it something sharper moved. She looked at the monitors because looking at people had never helped her survive. The driveway feed showed her body between Mateo and the sedan. The garage feed showed Victor's pale gloves near the dashboard. The corridor feed showed the West Valet Station, empty except for the open tie box she had carried. 3 angles. 3 lies pretending to be truth. Then the head of security stepped in front of the table, blocking her view. "Enough. She's distracting you. Put her downstairs until we know who paid her." Ellie's fingers curled, not into a fist, but around the edge of the steel table. She stayed planted, solid, unmoved. "Move," the guard snapped. "I'm not done looking." The words left her before fear could soften them. The room inhaled. Mateo's gaze cut to her, dark and dangerous. "At what?" Ellie did not point at Victor. She pointed at the tie box on the valet station monitor, at the black ribbon still hanging over its edge, moving slightly in the air vent. "That box was closed when I left the dressing room," she said. "Someone opened it after me." On the frozen garage feed, Victor's glove vanished below the dash. On the valet feed, the tie box trembled again. And behind the dashboard of the black sedan, something tiny blinked red. The red blink behind the dashboard pulsed once, then disappeared as if the car itself had swallowed it. The head of security saw Ellie look and move faster than she expected, his hand clamping around her upper arm. "That's enough." His fingers dug through the gray sleeve of her uniform. "You don't get to invent bombs because you got caught playing with silk." Ellie's face tightened, but she did not step back. She had spent years being moved out of doorways, away from mirrors, around rich women's luggage, aside from men who believed their suits gave them ownership of every room. Not this time. She planted her feet against the marble, broad and steady, and let her weight become exactly what they had always mocked, something difficult to move. The guard pulled once. Ellie stayed where she was. The table rattled. The black tie slid toward the edge. Mateo's eyes narrowed. Hands off. The guard released her like the words had burned. Ellie did not thank Mateo. She reached for the tie before it fell. Not because it was expensive, but because she had learned that small things told the truth when powerful men lied. The silk was warm from the room now, but one end smelled faintly of the West Valet Station, cedar polish and cold air from a vent. The box on the monitor trembled again. Not from wind, from the vent kicking on every time the garage door pressure changed. The car isn't parked wrong for convenience, Ellie said, her voice low. It's parked there because the east floodlight can't reach the driver's lap from that angle. The head of security scoffed. Now she's an electrician. No, Ellie said. I'm the woman who changes those bulbs when your men are too important to find a ladder. Silence cut hard through the room. She moved before anyone decided to stop her, stepping to the wall panel beside the monitors. Her hand found the lower switch without looking. She had dusted around it every Thursday. She had wiped fingerprints from it after drunken capos leaned there during late meetings. She pressed it. Outside, the east floodlight exploded across the rain-glossed driveway. On the monitor, the black sedan filled with white glare. Victor flinched, just for a second, but that second was enough. His right hand came up from below the dash, and the light caught the matte black shape resting against his thigh. A compact pistol, suppressed, pointed toward the rear passenger door, where Mateo would have lowered himself into the leather seat. The room did not gasp. Men like these did not gasp. They simply stopped pretending they were not afraid. The head of security went pale. That could be planted footage. Ellie turned to him, still holding the black tie. Then tell him to open his door with both hands visible. Victor's face changed on the screen. Not panic. Calculation. The block phone on the steel table stopped ringing. Behind the dashboard, the tiny red light blinked again, faster now. Mateo stepped closer to the monitor, his shadow falling over Ellie's shoulder without touching her. For the first time, his silence did not feel like judgment. It felt like a weapon being aimed in the same direction as her truth. Nobody touches Miss Whitaker, he said. Then, without taking his eyes off Victor's hidden hand, he placed the black tie back in front of Ellie like evidence he had finally decided belonged to her. And nobody opens that car until she tells me what else she sees. What else? Mateo asked, and the question did not sound like suspicion anymore. It sounded like a blade being offered handle first. Ellie kept the black tie between her fingers and forced herself to look at the monitor, not at the men waiting for her to fail. Victor sat in the wash of the east floodlight with one hand frozen near the pistol and the other hovering above the dash. The tiny red light blinked again, too steady to be a warning from the car, too deliberate to be random. That isn't part of the sedan, Ellie said. The security lights blink amber. Garage sensors blink blue. Red is from something added. The head of security swallowed hard. She cannot know that. Ellie did not turn toward him. A mop under those cars when your mechanics leave coffee cups on the lift. Mateo's gaze shifted, sharp and silent. Zoom the dashboard. A guard obeyed. The screen tightened until the black leather, chrome trim, and Victor's gloved hand filled the wall. Ellie leaned closer, her reflection faint on the monitor glass. Her body was still shaking from the guard's grip, but she kept her voice level. The red blink is too low. If it were a tracker, Victor wouldn't keep his hand near it. He's guarding a trigger or waiting for a signal. From who? Mateo asked. Not who hired him. Not yet. From who? He was testing the shape of her fear. Ellie looked at the frozen garage feed, then at the valet station monitor where the tie box sat open under the vent. Whoever opened that box after I left the dressing room knew I would be blamed if anything went wrong near your suit. The room tightened around her. She had not meant to say it that clearly. Once the words existed, they could not be folded away. The head of security stepped back from the table as if the tie had become poisonous. Mateo picked it up with 2 fingers, studying the silk and Ellie had saved from the floor. Why the tie, he asked. Ellie's mouth went dry. Because it gave him a reason for me to be close to you. On the monitor, Victor moved. Just a twitch, but everyone saw it. Mateo raised one hand. The guards froze again. No shots. No panique. Only control. Check the valet feed timestamp. The keyboard clicked. The image jumped back, minute by minute, until the empty West station appeared. The tie box was closed. Then the screen blurred for half a second, just like the garage feed. When it cleared, the box was open. No person visible. No face. No hand. Just an impossible change in a locked corridor. Ellie felt the old instinct to apologize rise in her throat and crushed it. The camera didn't glitch, she said. It was looped. The words landed harder than any scream. Mateo looked at her then, truly looked, not as staff, not as interruption, not as a soft-bodied maid who had wandered into a war she could not understand. He looked at her like she had just handed him the outline of an invisible knife. You saw that from 2 feeds. I saw it because nobody bothers hiding things from the woman holding the cleaning cart, Ellie said. The blocked phone lit again. This time, the caller ID was no longer blank. A single name appeared across the screen, Rourke. Then a text followed beneath it. Tell your maid to stop looking. The name Rourke burned across the phone screen. And for the first time that night, every man in the West security room looked at Ellie as if she had become more dangerous than the gun in Victor Hale's lap. Tell your maid to stop looking. Not the maid. Your maid. The words made the air change. The head of security reached for his weapon again, but Mateo's voice cut across the room before metal cleared leather. 1 more inch, and you lose the hand. The guard froze. Ellie did not. Her eyes stayed on the message, on the insult wrapped inside it, on the way Caleb Rourke had reduced her to property, because that was how men like him understood women in uniforms. Something to use. Something to blame. Something to silence. Mateo stepped beside her, close enough that the open collar of his shirt brushed the edge of the black tie, still in her hand. You are now target, he said quietly. That is not protection. That is information. Ellie turned to him. Her arms still ached where the guard had grabbed her. Her throat still burned from every swallowed humiliation in this house. But she lifted her chin. Then do not hide me in a room and call it safety. A flicker crossed Mateo's face, almost too small to see. Not softness. Recognition. What would you call safety, Miss Whitaker? Being allowed to finish what I saw. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of men realizing the woman they had dismissed was giving orders without raising her voice. Mateo looked at the bruise forming through the sleeve of her uniform, then at the guard who had put it there. Leave. The man's face drained. Boss, now. The guard left with the shame of a man who had been stripped without a hand touching him. Ellie watched him go, but she did not smile. She knew better than to mistake one order for justice. Mateo reached for the tie, then stopped before his fingers touched hers. He did not take it. He let her keep it. That restraint unsettled her more than possession would have. Show me, he said. The monitors shifted to the estate map. Garage, valet station, servant corridor, east driveway, service elevator, wine cellar access, old tunnel seal behind the laundry room. Ellie stepped closer to the steel table. The men moved aside for her this time, not willingly, but because Mateo's silence made refusal look suicidal. Her soft, heavy presence filled the narrow space between weapons and screens. She did not shrink from it. She placed one finger on the service corridor. Victor did not need to open the tie box himself. Someone used the staff passage. That camera angle misses the lower shelf because no one thinks servants hide anything above the mop sink. And you know that because? Mateo asked. Because I'm the one who gets blamed when that shelf is dusty. A bodyguard lowered his eyes. Mateo did not. He watched her like the mansion had developed a voice and chosen her mouth to speak through. From this moment, he said, no one moves a car, opens a door, touches a feed, or answers Rourke without her seeing it first. Ellie's breath caught before she could stop it. It was not a crown. It was not trust. Not yet. It was a dangerous invitation into the machinery that could kill them both. The phone lit again. This time it showed a live image, grainy and green, from inside the service passage Ellie had just named. Her cleaning cart stood abandoned beneath the camera. On its folded linen, Someone had placed a black leather driving glove and a single silver bullet. The silver bullet on Ellie's folded linen was not a threat. It was an invitation. Every man in the room reacted to it the way Caleb Rourke wanted them to react. Hands to weapons, eyes to the service passage, bodies turning away from the monitors that still showed Victor locked in the black sedan outside. Mateo did not move, but the air around him sharpened. "Secure the passage," one bodyguard barked. Two men headed for the door. Ellie stepped in front of them. She did not do it dramatically. She simply planted herself in the narrow gap between the steel table and the exit, soft and solid and breathing hard, with Mateo's black tie wrapped once around her fist. "Stop." The word was not loud, but it struck the room harder than a shout. The nearest guard glared down at her. "Move, Miss Whitaker." No, his jaw tightened. "That is my corridor." "It is my corridor," Ellie said, and for one impossible second, the mansion seemed to know she was right. She had waxed that floor on her knees. She had dragged laundry carts through that passage before dawn. She had cleaned blood-colored wine from the baseboards after underbosses laughed too loudly and pretended nothing had spilled. The men with guns knew maps. Ellie knew habits. She pointed at the live image on the phone. "My cart is facing the wrong direction." Silence. The guard blinked. "What?" "The front wheel sticks. If I leave it near the linen shelf, I turn it toward the laundry room, so it does not roll. That cart is turned toward the east garage release." Mateo's eyes cut to the estate map. The service passage ran behind the laundry room, past the old wine cellar door, and ended at a maintenance panel beside the garage bay where the convoy power could be cut manually. Rourke had not sent them a picture to scare Ellie. He had sent them a picture to empty the security room and pull armed men toward a corridor wired to betray them. The phone vibrated again. A new video feed opened. Ellie's cleaning cart rolled an inch forward by itself. The silver bullet tipped struck the metal tray, and the sound came through the speaker too clearly. "Not recorded. Live. Pressure trigger," Mateo said softly. The head of security went gray. Outside, on the driveway monitor, Victor's free hand moved toward the dashboard again. Two threats. One inside the mansion. One inside the car. Rourke was forcing Mateo to choose which betrayal to stop first. Ellie felt fear rise so fast it almost stole her voice, but she kept her body in the doorway. She knew what everyone expected. The maid would break, sob, apologize for being in the way. Instead, she looked at the map, then at the monitors, then at the black tie in her hand. The silks narrow and still carried the faint cedar scent of the valet station vent. "Airflow. Vents. Pressure. Do not open the passage door," she said. "Turn off the east ventilation first." A guard frowned. "That will blind the garage exhaust system." "No," Ellie said. "It will stop the draft pushing my cart into the trigger." No one moved until Mateo did. He turned his head, not to his men, but to Ellie. "Which switch?" She stepped to the lower panel beneath the monitors, the one polished men never bent to touch and servants cleaned every week. Her hand found the unmarked breaker. She flipped it down. On the phone screen, the linen on her cart stopped fluttering. The bullet stopped rocking. In the sedan, Victor looked toward the mansion for the first time, and his calm finally cracked. Mateo's voice dropped into the room like a verdict. "Open a line to every guard on this property. They listen to her until I say otherwise." Ellie exhaled once, but the relief did not last. On the driveway feed, the black sedan's rear lights suddenly ignited without Victor touching the wheel. The convoy engine roared awake by remote, and the locked car began to roll backward toward the mansion steps where Ellie and Mateo had been standing minutes before. The black sedan rolled backward like a coffin learning to breathe. Its rear lights burned red through the rain, and every guard in the west security room shouted at once, all of them reaching for guns that could not stop 2 tons of armored steel sliding toward the mansion steps. Ellie saw the mistake before they made it. Bullets would not save the foyer. Panic would not save Mateo. The car was not being driven. It was being released. "Do not shoot," she said. No one listened until Mateo's voice cut through the chaos. "You heard her." The room froze around the order, and Ellie moved. Her large body pushed into the space beneath the monitor wall, not graceful, not small, not trying to disappear. The men with guns had spent years standing above panels they never bothered to understand. Ellie had cleaned around them every Thursday, kneeling on marble while they stepped over a mop bucket. She knew which cover stuck in the winter. She knew which switch hummed when the garage doors opened. She knew the old driveway bollard still ran on a servant side override because delivery trucks used to scrape the east column. Her hand found a recessed lever under the lower panel. "Brace the steps," she whispered and pulled. Outside, 3 black steel posts shot up from the rain-slicked stone. The sedan slammed against them with a brutal metallic scream. Glass spiderwebbed. Victor's head snapped forward, but the car stopped 6 feet from the doors where Mateo had stood minutes earlier. The silence afterward was not relief. It was worship's darker cousin. On every screen, the DeLuca estate had just watched a maid save its king twice. Mateo looked at the crushed sedan, then at Ellie's hand still wrapped in his black tie. "Open every feed," he said. "Now." This time, no one looked at the head of security. They looked at Ellie. She pointed to the servant passage camera first, then the garage loop, then the valet station where the open-type box waited beneath the vent. One by one, the hidden pattern exposed itself. A guard badge used in the wrong corridor, Victor's glove crossing the dashboard, the camera blackout, the cart trigger, the remote ignition. Rourke's network had not been invisible. It had only been hidden in places powerful men refused to lower their eyes to see. Mateo made 3 calls. He did not raise his voice once. By sunrise, Victor Hale was dragged from the sedan alive, disarmed, and shaking. The head of security was stripped of his weapon, his badge, and every man who had laughed with him. Caleb Rourke's convoy was stopped before it reached the North Shore meeting, its accounts frozen, its drivers turned, its safe house addresses spilling from the very routes Ellie had marked on the estate map. Revenge did not arrive as fire. It arrived as doors locking all across Chicago. Later that morning, rain still shining on the marble steps, Mateo DeLuca walked out before his gathered guards, captains, drivers, and silent underworld guests. Ellie stood beside him in her gray maid's uniform, bruised at the arm, exhausted, soft and steady and impossible to overlook. The repaired black tie rested in her hands. For one breath, the old world tried to understand what it was seeing. Then Mateo lowered his head slightly, not because he was weak, but because he was choosing the only person in the estate who had earned the right to touch his throat. Ellie tied the knot slowly. No one laughed. No one whispered. When she finished, she did not step behind him. Mateo turned toward the convoy and said, "From this day forward, no car moves, no door opens, no camera is trusted, and no man in this house outranks Eleanor Whitaker when she says stop." The bodyguards who had nearly dragged her away stood rigid beneath the chandeliers of rain. The drivers lowered their eyes. Victor, cuffed beside the ruined sedan, watched the woman he had counted on being invisible become the final authority over the road he had betrayed. Mateo offered Ellie the first position at his side, not behind him, not below him. She looked at the black car, at the tie, at the men waiting for permission from a woman they had dismissed, and lifted her chin. "Clear," Ellie said. Only then did the DeLuca convoy move.